How do you keep going? How do you keep living with the death of your child? Well, that was the case for Bob and Darlene Manuel when their 22-year-old son Matthew, their only child, was killed in a tragic accident in Fort McMurray, Alberta. Bob, thanks for being here on 100 Huntley Street to share a very tragic story.
Thanks for having me.
So you're from Newfoundland and Matthew was adopted. Tell me, what was he like as a young guy?
Matthew was a great musician. He loved the outdoors. Music was his passion in his life. He was a jokester, liked to play jokes on everyone, especially his grandparents. But music was his life. He played in the Salvation Army Band in Stephenville, plus he also played on the worship team at the Pentecostal Church in Stephenville. And then the mill that I worked in Stephenville closed down and we had to move to Alberta, so we moved to Sherwood Park. Matthew played bass guitar at the worship team at the Glenmore Temple in Salvation Army. And so life was hard, a big adjustment for a 15-year-old to move from a small town in Newfoundland, 250 people in a high school, to a high school of 1,750 people, and you're lost. We had made a promise to Matthew when we moved from Newfoundland that he could go back and finish his last year of high school and graduate with all the kids that he went to school with most of his life. So we honored that commitment. Darlene and Matthew went back and stayed with my dad for a year so he could graduate with all of his friends. He tragically tried to help a girl that was under, or she was into addictions. We could see within 6 weeks from Matthew moving to the Matthew that we knew that he had got dragged into her world very quickly, and it spiraled down very quickly. And the next thing we knew, our son was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and was something that he never saw or witnessed in our house. Like, I grew up in a Christian home. Matthew grew up in a Christian home. There was never alcohol, drugs, or anything in our home. So it was a major surprise to us when we seen our son go down this path.
So there's some behavioral things you started to notice, Bob, in the way Matthew was acting, and he was not the same Matthew that you knew.
No. What we found, he had been an honor student, and he had attended school regularly. And what we had found out was that once in May, he met this girl. School stopped, and so his marks were high enough that he graduated, still managed to graduate from high school, but he didn't attend, and everything just went off the rails with him.
So for 3 years, Matthew's battling addictions. He wants to stop. There's times of hope. Eventually, he gets a job in Fort McMurray, Alberta, and it looked like things were going good.
Absolutely, and I helped him get the job in Fort McMurray, and I sent him to what I considered was a dry camp. It was supposed to be a dry camp.
Yeah, we're talking the oil fields here.
Absolutely. So anyway, Matthew had been working the night shift. I had dropped him off at the aerodrome here in Calgary from to catch his flight. So your baggage had to be x-rayed, so we knew there was no alcohol that he had. So he worked a full week, and on Friday night the shift changed and somebody brought in alcohol, and I guess Matthew must have bought the alcohol. So he called in sick on the night shift for that Saturday night.
And this is October 12th, 2013.
And so anyway, he was going outside and a security guard noticed him, and so he noticed that he had been stumbling, and so anyway they stopped him and they could smell the alcohol on his breath. So then they called his employer, and he also called the company that ran the camp. And so anyway, they took him off site at 12:30 in the morning and took him to Fort McMurray. The RCMP tells us he called somebody, so he got dropped off at the hotel at 1:30 in the morning. He's seen at the BMO bank machine at 2 o'clock taking out money. Then at about 3:45, he's seen a pickup pulls up to the BMO machine, and you can see that Matthew was in the back seat of a pickup. They take out the money. Next thing we know, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, over on the other side of Fort McMurray. Matthew is seen running onto a construction site. He's chased by the 2 security guards that are on night shift. So he starts running up some stairs on the construction site, and he ducks into what the RCMP is telling us he would think was a dark room, but it was actually an open elevator shaft, which wasn't enclosed properly. There was only a piece of 2x4 across it with some paint on it, so he didn't realize, and he fell 4 floors to his death. They tell us that he died he died immediately, like they said, so like there was no suffering. So at 4:15, Matthew was found in the bottom of the elevator shaft. So.
And you didn't find out until
42 hours
42 hours later because his wallet and his cell phone were stolen or lost or whatever.
The guys threw out the contents of his wallet. I guess they missed the garbage bag and it went down by the side. It was like a metal can. And they found all of his identification and they passed it over to the police. And that's how they identified Matthew. My brother was and his wife were up visiting because my nephew had got married on that Saturday night. And I happened to be the MC at the wedding. So Matthew was supposed to attend, but he didn't go because there was open bar and he didn't want to be around where the alcohol was at. So we get home, it's 11 o'clock in the night, and my brother comes and said, hey, the police is at your door. So we go downstairs and I say to Darnie, this is not good. This is not going to be good. So Calgary City Police asked me, are you the father of Matthew Robert Manuel? I mean, yes. He said, I just want to let you know that he passed away on a construction site. And we're like, what? And so like, I work for the same company that he did. And it's like, and he said, well, that's all the information I can give you. I don't know anything else, but you need to be at the medical examiner's office in Edmonton for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So like, then I'm calling around everybody trying to find out why hasn't anyone called me from the company that I work for and say Matthew passed away. We find out later that he had been removed from camp. No one notified us as being next of kin that they'd taken Matthew off site. So I struggled with that.
So Bob, you're dealing not only with grief, but there had to have been some anger there, and then your faith. I mean, those things are all, how did you get through this? How did you and Darlene get through this?
Well, hope is a big thing. And so we have the hope that we're going to see Matthew again. Like, he loved Jesus with all his heart, but he had a disease. He tried everything in his power to beat that disease, but the disease took him. And the Salvation Army officer that came with me to the medical examiner's office, his wife looked at Darnie and said, you know what, the Lord had mercy on Matthew because he took him now instead of having to go through this all of his life. So since then, we've been trying to change the stigma on what addictions is. I had to wait a year before I could go back to Fort McMurray to pick up Matthew's belongings. And the RCMP officer that I dealt with, who did the investigation, he was a Christian, and so he had called us and he said that he prayed over Matthew that morning when he found him, because he said, you know, he looked at him and he's like, this is a good kid, he's well dressed, it's not the normal people that they see. And said he prayed for the family, he said what they were going to have to deal with. So it gave us comfort that there was someone there, that God had put someone there. So all those things added up. So like, you know, when you start to look back and see that God had his hands in a lot of this, do I agree with God's mission to take Matthew at an early age? No.
Those are, of course, things that we will not understand, Bob, until we get to the other side. But before we go, I just want to talk about the first Christmas, because this was the Thanksgiving weekend and Christmas comes a couple of months later. Tell me what you and Darlene did.
So we decided to go back to Newfoundland for Christmas, and so what we did ask was that all the relatives would send a message or a reminder or something, a memory of Matthew. So we put up a stocking, hung it by the chimney in my sister-in-law's house in Corner Brook, and we called it the memory stocking. So at the end of the Christmas, after the dinner was done, and we all sit down and we took the stocking down and we read the message that the people had sent. We laughed, we cried. There was some healing into it, yes, it was really good. When we got back from Newfoundland, we went to Beaumont, and
just south of Edmonton.
Yes, we're at my brother's house, and we were sitting down on the sofa, and Darlene looked, and there was a tree by the sofa, and she started looking at the tree. Then she said, "Is that a memory tree? Is that a Matthew tree?" And my sister-in-law said, mission accomplished. She said, yes, it's a memory tree. What she had done, she had asked all the family to send an ornament of something that reminded them of Matthew. When the packages started coming in, it was like there was curling broom, there was fish, there was deer, there was music notes, there was all kinds of things that he did, skates, skidoos, sea-doos. There's like birds, he loved birds, and like all different things with messages, and it's like no one sent the same thing.
Thanks, Bob, for sharing your story.
No problem, thank you.
You know, and if you're dealing with an addiction yourself, a family member, maybe struggling with an addiction, please know that we have amazing people that will pray with you. They're not professionals. We can direct you to professionals, but our prayer lines are always open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 1-866-273-4444. Or if you're in grief right now, you've lost somebody special like Matthew was to Bob and Darlene, those prayer lines are also open for you as well.